Okay. Hello, everyone. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is a very interesting episode in the sense that I will be sharing my experience with geometry in my inner realms. This is a component to my life so far. I would say that geometry is like an important part of my divinity. There was a great Indian mathematician, I forget his name, Ramanujan, I think his name was Ramanujan. There was this great mathematician, and this mathematician would know to do certain things in mathematics that certain scholars were like, how do you know this, right? And he would say, I have a Devi, and what that means is he's in contact with a sort of divine archetype. And then this man says that my God bleeds geometry. Just take that sentence in. My God bleeds geometry. That's what Ramanujan, this Indian mathematician, said. Now, in this episode, I'm a person wanting to speak about a geometrical significance of reality and the mind. And also a sort of significance of abstraction, but before that I have to speak to our monotheistic audiences. Because in the subtitle of this episode I have written Transcendental Allegiances. Alright, to begin. I would start here by saying that in the 6th century something interesting happened. Something huge happened that influenced culture in such a way where its echoes still remain to this day in 2021. And at the same time, it became a part of human history. And that was in some sense the beginning of monotheistic religion, which began by denying a partner to truth. This is a very important idea, because I am speaking about the inner realms. I'm speaking about the dimensions of human psychology where archetypes may be found. You know, there are people on the planet right now, they're having a relationship with their imagination, with extraterrestrials, with with ghosts, you know, with angels and demons, and the stories go on. You know, human beings have a relationship with the animate dimensions of their intelligence, you know, within the inner dimensions of their intelligence, right? Even we can say a person remembering who they were yesterday is equivalent to a supernatural experience, right? But I'll get into that. So in the 6th century, religions began. If somebody wants to understand monotheistic religion, just religion in general, a very interesting way to engage it is to consider that human beings were wondering where human beings are coming from. So you can imagine one human being back in the day being like, yo, where do human beings come from? And we see that the human being comes from people. People create other people, right? Now, there was this notion, imagine someone being like, okay, human beings come from a person, from a personality position. Could it be that the universe also comes from a person? Right? That idea could arise, whether unconsciously or consciously, whether through the context of revelation or context of the exploration of the intellect. So, human beings, upon seeing their human reflection, they manage to see this reflection on bigger scales. You can say we in a micro fashion saw human beings, and in a macro fashion considered if we are in some sense the imagination of God, which really the religious person is actually being that. You know, religion is a very interesting way of saying that human beings are actually God, you know. But anyways, in the monotheistic tradition, there was this notion that truth does not have a partner, that if there is a truth, it is not an object and it is not a subject, it is just an absolute archetype, you know. So in some sense, God is one of the most strangest words, because some cultures subjectified it, some cultures objectified it, some cultures back in the day before the monotheism, you know, and I would say even before proper polytheism, there was just object worship. People were like, yo, this object is shiny, okay, this object is my God from now on, you know. Or you could say somebody put a chair in like the forest and sunlight was hitting the chair, and like people were walking by and they saw a chair in sunlight and they were like, yo, this chair is a divine sign, right? I'm just trying to say the human mind was open into interpreting unknown experiences into a very absolutist unknown archetype. But anyways, this is, I mean, I'll say it this way. This is before God, so it would mean like people were worshipping trees, people were creating their own gods, right? You know, there's the story of Abraham in religious traditions where Abraham, at least I know it from the Islamic context, where what happens is Abraham, this is in like, so many people know from the Islamic world that there is something called Mecca, right? That black cube where Muslims walk around. That black cube is actually an empty house, and it used to be the house where people would put all their idols and gods inside. And so what happens is the prophet Abraham comes and sees people are worshiping their own kind of made of clay and feather and whatever they could find kind of gods, and so he's trying to convert them to a sort of mono truth in reality, you know, a sort of God that is inconceivable. So Abraham, one day where all these people are gone, Abraham, all these people come back and they see all the statues are broken except one, and there's a hammer, like a sledgehammer or something, beside one of the statues, and Abraham is there standing beside that one statue, and the people are like, yo, Abraham, did you break our gods? You know? And Abraham says, no, it was this one statue. And then they're all like, yo, that statue isn't alive, it can't break the other gods. Then Abraham goes and says, well, if it's not alive, how can it be God? Right? So it was pretty much a phase in human history where the attention of the significance of truth moved from inanimate and just a purely inanimate object or an image to a consideration of a quality of being. Do you see? So in some sense, a lot of religious wars, and guys, by the way, I did not draw this picture. I found this picture on wallhaven.com, and I don't know, it doesn't give an artist name, but it was the picture was incredible, so I shared it. At the end of the talk, I may share my own work and talk about that a little too, about how I draw geometry. But anyways, what I'm trying to say, back to the talk, Abraham tried to awaken the people at that time to a notion that there is one truth and it has no double, it has no copy. Do you see? So now I'm a person in 2021 speaking to both secular and theist and atheistic audiences. And what that means is I'm in such a unique position because I'm that person who neither the theist wants to look at and neither the atheist. Do you know? Because I am dismissing both positions ultimately, as I'll go on to explain in this talk. So I just want to say, from the religious angle and through how, like right now, certain audiences are religious, in this episode when I talk about transcendental allegiances and in some sense engaging the content of the inner realms geometrically or having a geometrical relationship with the divine, I am not saying that an image can be your truth. Do you know? I am not saying in this talk is not in an absolutist fashion. You know, I'm not a fascist giving a podcast, you know. I'm just sharing some internal experiences I've had with geometry and how it's become relevant in my life, the attention to geometry, its power, and its not its ideological power, but its like ability. Geometry gives us a very important ability, and I will tell you 100% this is happening, and people can write in the comment section. There are many people on this planet who probably are randomly drawing geometry, and there's a reason for that. But anyways, I just wanted to share this context that relationships with geometrical divinity, let's call it for now, or divine geometry, or the New Age community calls it sacred geometry, doesn't mean that form can replace an absolute moment. Because if we say 50% of the moment is body stuff or physical stuff, and we say 50% of our moment of being is mind stuff, I cannot land the plane on just the physical destination, and I can't land the plane on the subjective destination. What I mean by that is reality is neither an object, neither a subject, but we need an object and subject just like we need two eyes to see the same moment, to be aware of intelligence. So, now to the geometry, now to the good stuff. First, a quote from Benjamin Disraeli. He says, "Life is too short to be little. You must enlarge your imagination and then act on it." You see, I would say most human beings, their relationship with their imagination, sorry guys, this was disconnected in the middle, so I don't know how much people heard and what's just going on. But I'll repeat just in case if a certain part of what I was saying was not recorded. Okay, I think it's back to normal, whatever. I was just saying that when it comes to sorry guys, there's an issue with this, with the stream. It's giving an error on my side. I don't know if I'm audible. Alright guys, I'm going to assume it's audible. If it's not audible, let me know. And if it's not audible, I don't know how you can let me know. anyways, I'm going to continue. I don't know what the last thing the audience heard was, but pretty much I'm saying we look at reality, 50% body, 50% mind, so it can't be either one of them alone. When we look at most human beings, their creativity is, I am considering, is their memory. That means somebody may be like, I'm not creative, I don't have an imagination, but I remember what happened yesterday. So that's really where, in some sense, imagination is beginning, with the content you have initially access to, as a sort of alphabet of imagery of your reality so far. So I went on to say that there is three components when it comes to reality, and before we wonder about the origin of memory even, right, that there is color. Right now, whoever you are listening to me, unless you're colorblind, that's a different story, but whoever you are, just whatever image of life you're seeing, there is a dimension of color. Things have color. They can be defined by their color. It's as if, like, imagine there's a blue bottle and somebody doesn't know the word bottle. They could just be like, pass that blue thing over there, right? So we can identify reality through its color. Then there is through its space and depth and dimension, which means the distance of phenomenology from you. It's like past that thing that's over there, for example. And then there is the geometry, the shape and design of reality. And this is very important because the scientific mind is really focused on trying to create a world of facts, which means to create a world where it's one photograph, which is impossible. This world is like a film, and a lot of ideological systems on this planet are treating it like a photograph, which is an error. But anyways, these are the three things. That means there could be totally somebody explaining a path, poetically a path to enlightenment through color, somebody can ask, through a path through space, and then through geometry. I feel personally, in this lifetime at least, I am here to share about the geometry of divinity. That's a huge part of my work here. Because the geometry I've experienced in my inner realms, and sometimes throughout the day, what takes place geometrically in my inner realms, overlaid upon the outer realms, I think that's fascinating to share with audiences. Maybe others are having similar experiences, maybe others are not, but it's worth sharing. So about these 3 points of color, depth and dimension, and then the geometry, when it comes to color, I would say that is the shamanic experience, right? You can say the change of the color of the world is a sort of enlightenment. In the shamanic experience, there was a sort of interference with the neurology through the plant kingdom, and it was as if the person had an allegiance with the plant kingdom, and that allegiance allowed their psychology to totally access a different constitution of the shape of reality, or even the meaning of reality, right? So that's the shamanic path. I would say it was a sort of enlightenment through color, through visual. Then we have the yogic mind and the Zen mind, right? And the yogic and the Zen mind, they were through space. Their method of enlightenment, pretty much a lot of Buddhism and Zen, they all acknowledge the emptiness of the object. It's as if somebody came up to Buddha and it's like, Buddha, I'm suffering. And Buddha's like, buddy, what is suffering? The nature of the object is empty. When we look at something, it is imbued with the meaning of our mind, not before we see it. That's why we even have that among human beings, where we're like, what kind of impression did I get from that person? Which is another way of saying, how did my mind work to understand something it saw? Anyways, and guys, the only reason I'm repeating is because I don't know if this thing I said about the shamanic mind, the yogic mind, and the geometrical dimension, if it was recorded or not. That's why I'm repeating it. Anyways, now to the geometrical dimension. All right. Now we think geometry in present time, in present day, 2021, geometry is taught as a branch of mathematics. Now I have this vision that geometry is actually its own branch of knowledge. That means there is an understanding of geometry that has nothing to do with the orders we extract from it, right? So I'm saying there's a way of looking at geometry where we're like, oh yeah, I know what that shape is, I know what that means, I know what that measurement looks like, right? But then there's a view of geometry where it's as if it can't be measured. It's like, that's the power of abstract art. There is no way you can contain it, so you are left to having be changed by the new experience, right? Because what is the brain doing? It's exposed to certain experiences, then in accordance to what it has familiarized itself with, through that familiarity, it processes and articulates the environment around it. Now I'm going to just zoom in on the geometry component, in the sense of saying, what are some experiences I've had with geometry? In 2000, what do you call it? Okay, I've had a bunch, I'll share them with you. Some of them I've shared before, some of them may be new. So in 2013, I had a dream. I had a profound relationship with a geometrical symbol in a dream state. And I'm going to explain it to you. It was, so what happens is, I find myself at 6 a.m., my consciousness awake. It's as if my mind has woken up earlier than my body, and so I see my body is asleep, and in some sense, but my mind is awake. And it's a sort of sleep paralysis. I can't tell you how much sleep paralysis used to happen to me when I was younger, like ridiculous amounts of mornings I would wake up and the body was too heavy to move. And later on I realized that the solution to that is just to listen to your breathing, and the body automatically awakens. So anybody who's experiencing sleep paralysis, you just have to listen to the sound of your breath and your body instantly wakes up from that very heavy state. So anyways, it was in the morning, I notice my mind has woken up, my bed is in the body. Excuse me, my body is in the bed. My bed is in the body. No, I mean, my body is in the bed. And I hear, for the first time in a dream state, I hear a word. I hear this word, Glida, all right? And I don't know what it means. I just hear this word. I know the moment I hear it in my, you could say in my inner realms and during the dream state, where I'm kind of like awake in my room, in that semi-conscious state, I say the word, and there is a projection where it's like an instant kind of, it was kind of like a quick teleportation or like quick lift off, right? My attention just suddenly went somewhere, and for a moment I saw this giant wall in space with a giant inverted triangle cave. And I remember after seeing that, I saw something else, but I'll keep that for another episode. And I wake up, and it's like, you know that moment where you wake up and you're sitting on the side of your bed and your hands are like in your hair, being like, whoa, what just happened? There was a complete shift. That was one of the most fascinating, and even up to this day, one of the biggest mysteries of my reality, which I managed to, in some sense, understand why it had happened later on. Right, I think this happened in 2013. I would say in 2000, at the end of 2016, I understood what it was. 3 years later, I understood what the implication of that was. Right, so that was a dream. That was a relationship with geometry, where it was like a geometric mystery was shared in my unconscious. That was a sort of relationship with. That was a sort of way of saying that. The spirit of geometry found me in my dream state in that moment. There was a geometrical question mark, right? And anyways, the inverted triangle is a very important symbol to me, in accordance to that experience. Now, some time passed, I think a year passed, and I was, where was I? Anyways, I was somewhere. And I was walking on the street. Imagine you're walking down the street from one block to another block, okay, from a main street. I'll never forget it, guys. If you take this idea for a moment, that the mind is another room over the body's room, just take it as if the mind is a film and the body is a film, and when a person is preferenceless, their mind's film looks similar to their body's film, right? I was walking down the street, and a geometrical shape from where my head was began expressing and moving into the three-dimensional space, and from every point of, I don't know, I wish I could draw it for you. Imagine like an inverted triangle and a circle. The circle goes through the inverted triangle, through many different inverted triangles, and from each point there was a sight. There was access to sight. So what I'm saying in another way is like I had this experience where my mind geometrically traveled and reached a certain point where I was fathoming at the end of the block what sight would look like. So what I'm telling you is that geometry is like an extension. So if the first dream, it was like a mystery, divine mystery, in the second experience, which was in the conscious waking state, this is not a dream. I'm walking down the street and my mind, it's like it projects geometry going three-dimensionally forward, and from the points of the geometrical shape that extended in a 3D way, if the mind, imagine this is the film of the mind being played over the body, I saw the end of the block, and I at the end walked there, and I realized it was like the mind was simulating. You know how there's game engines? Like there are these game engines where pretty much when they come to create a video game, you can think of the first GTA video games. In those video games, where the character goes, the world appears around the character, but really there is no world, and there is no outer world, right? So wherever the character walks, the reality takes shape. The reality takes shape wherever the attention of the character goes, right? And wherever the attention of the character goes, all the other realities cease to exist. But if its attention goes back, they suddenly exist. I'm talking about video game characters, guys, how there's a video game engine to the game before the game is even run. So that was another experience with geometry, where it was like I was using geometry in a realm where imagination did not have the limits of reality to assist my reality. And there are moments, I can tell you, maybe up to now, maybe it's getting close to a dozen times I've experienced automatic geometry, right? So imagine somebody, they walk and they're like, okay, I'll give you a hilarious example. Someone goes to, let's say, the psychologist and says, I'm seeing ghosts, and the psychologist is like, all right, sir, you need to calm down right now. The psychologist is probably like, what kind of ghost? What are you talking about, man? But I'll tell you, imagine you somebody going up to a psychologist and saying, hey, I saw automated geometrical movement in my inner realms. That means just like how in Transformers, the person changed, what was his name? Like Bumblebee, that car, it was okay, in the Transformer movie, that yellow car, it was this inferior version. It sees the car that sponsored the film and it updates to that car, right? So through a new experience, one can update. Now imagine you are having a geometrical relationship with your mind, where when you wonder about the edge of it, the sense of color, depth, and geometry become turbulent. So when you actually are trying to see beyond the clouds of sensory perception and you're trying to pilot beyond those clouds, you actually experience the intensity or the dynamism, the extreme dynamism of space, color, and form, like shape. I can tell you, giving these talks was kind of, I would say, inner realm training for me to some degree. It's like while I'm giving a podcast, I'm also like practicing something experientially. I am saying pretty much having a relationship with unknown sourced moving geometry is pretty much like the something in the world moving beyond meaning, right? Because you can't teach a color, right? We can't teach space, we can't teach shape. These are things that only by the instantaneity of sight they're accessed. So let's say a person sees, like, those YouTube videos where these people are in these giant, like, spherical, transparent spheres, like balloon spheres, and they're rolling down a hill in a park and the person's inside it, right? So imagine you see a human being inside a sphere, and let's say you, in some sense, have gone bungee jumping, and while you've gone bungee jumping and your head is about to get very close to the water, like let's say it's one of those bungee jumps, suddenly your mind fathoms, what if I had a spherical shield around me? Do you see your mind, once exposed to a certain geometrical possibility, activates that? It's as if it's like thoughts never end, they orbit around us. I honestly feel this could be a very fascinating theory, that in some sense thoughts are not in the brain. They are projected from the brain, and because there's a gravitational, let's say, because we have a mass as an entity, our thoughts are in our orbit, you know? You know, I've noticed this sometimes where in the middle of a talk, I forget a point and then I just wait for it, and it's like after 10 seconds, the thought orbited around my head and it came back to where my forehead was, you know? And I'm saying this in an abstract way, like this whole episode is me trying to share how man's relationship with the unknown can lead to geometrical reflections of selfhood. And also when I say the spirit of geometry, the spirit, the concept of the spirit, it can be seen from an individual context, like, oh man, that person's a spirit, you know? Or it can be seen as the spirit of an era, the spirit of a paradigm, the spirit of a movement, right? And which ultimately it means inspiration, you know? It's as if it's like what the spirit is in the moment, you know? I mean, people are different. From my youth, like in my youth, I remember I was like maybe like 8 years old or something, and I remember I had bought this notebook where the cover of the notebook, there was literally a picture of wood, right? So the notebook wasn't made of wood, but the cover had a picture of wood, so it gave the illusion as if you had a wooden cover to your notebook. And I had this notebook, and I remember when I was young, I would make sketches of inventions of my own, like whatever I thought, you know, like imagine an 8-year-old kid, you know, drawing sketches. And I remember at that time, I didn't like math that much, so all the sketches were just geometry. It's just I would draw lines, you know. But I will tell you, that fascination for how it's like shape is the outline of a system of intelligent movement, or even non-intelligent. I would say to be conscious of the geometry of the moment is a very advanced state of mind. To realize that geometry is the common denominator of everything that is real, because everything that is real has a shape. Because if it didn't have a shape, there would be no way of testing anything to see if it's real or not, right? You know, it's like a person touches, let's say, a brown table, and the person's like, did I touch the color brown right now? Did I touch a shape right now? Let's say, you know, the table's rectangular, you know? Or the person sees the combination of all of them. Oh, I touched the table, you see? This picture, I don't know who drew it, but the artist was incredible, the illustrator. And this picture is a perfect depiction of how the inner realms look like. Where geometrical events, which some of these geometrical events that follow the human archetype, which is the human geometry, you know what it is? It's as if like there's a way to look at the whole universe as if everything is geometry, and there is a pure geometrical language to the world, right? And this geometrical language, it's as if it's all image capture. So so what I mean by that is that just like this picture has like many different shapes in one picture, in one frame of sight, in the inner realms one may find multiple events taking place, and events that go beyond the human geometry, which with the human geometry, what is it? It is a biological life. Excuse me. My attention got taken away for a second. Where was I? It's like there's it's like everything is geometry, And to be human is a certain accepted range of this geometry. And anything that doesn't relate to the human geometry, we're like, yo, we don't like it, we don't want to understand it, we're afraid of it, right? But everything is shape. And this is a magnificent benefit. This is like a designer's greatest opportunity. Whoever you are, if you're a designer in this life, you have chosen one of the most, I would say, top tier professions in the realm, because the shape of our world will suggest its potential. I have also, if I was to keep going with the list of experiences of geometry in my inner realms, I have given shape to beings, and this may be a strange concept to share, but imagine you see a movie, and in a movie, I'll give you something hilarious. I'll tell you a hilarious example. Imagine this show, I remember watching this as a kid, called SpongeBob, where it was like this sponge living at the bottom of an ocean, which is technically impossible because sponges float, but but let's say, the SpongeBob archetype, Carl Jung would be proud of us in this moment. But let's say you see SpongeBob as a fictional character, okay? This rectangular, humanized fictional character, right? Now, imagine you just see the outlines. You forget there's a sponge there. You just see a rectangle that is moving and a rectangle that is alive. Or imagine somebody was solving the Rubik's Cube, and then they moved the Rubik's Cube, and the Rubik's Cube was like, ow! It would be like the geometry would come alive, would be humanized. So a person can perceive geometry, can perceive human archetypes, and the subconscious may mesh them. Once a multidimensional perspective is engaged, there is no such thing as success and failure. There is no such thing as victory or defeat. Why? Because everything is an angle to a point, and ultimately, I would say from the designer's eyes, it's just moving geometry. So we have an ability to consciously move as a geometrical entity, both in our inner realms and in the outer realms. We already have a shape. Everybody has a shape in the outer realms, right? Their appearance, in the outer realms, our biology is our shape, pretty much. But in the inner realms, you can choose to embody a geometrical vehicle, and what that means is attention is attributeless. So if you're a person who comprehends your presence in nature, and you become acquainted with the attributeless, sort of still and silent presence of watchfulness, like there's something inside every human being, every conscious being, where you can say it is the center of consciousness. And the center of consciousness is like a point. There are no degrees of perceiving it. Sorry guys, this was on mute. And I totally transitioned topics. Okay, it was 10 seconds. Alright. Anyways, one can use geometry as a vehicle. So first was a mystery. Second was extension, like extension of the body. Let's say the inner body is shape, is memory. For me, I have, because I trust the inverted triangular archetype, I have moved as that. There are moments where I literally sync in my inner realms the geometry with my outer realms. So what I mean by that is, like, I raise my hand in the air and I hold, like, let's say my index finger in the air, and in my inner realms I can visualize pretty much any shape I've seen, even three-dimensionally, spinning over. I can very comfortably discriminate between the inner realm and outer realm, and the moment you notice them separate from one another, it's like phenomenal, because your outer life, where you thought you were just a certain character in a story, that approach totally fades away. You know, they say man should seek his true nature. The human being should seek the truth of nature. I would also say that a person can sit down, close their eyes, and try to remember everything that happened, like throughout the day. For example, sometimes when I sleep I do this and it's way harder than it seems, guys, than it may seem. That means right before you sleep, imagine you close your eyes and you try to walk through the exact film of what happened through the day and what you did, you know. It's really good internal training. But anyways, what I'm saying is that our eyes can move as geometry. It's just there needs to be a geometrical equivalence, you know. That means if we have, like, let's say, it's kind of like the shape of our moment is its meaning. Shape is a very crucial thing in our human beings. We are actually not finding meaning, discovering meaning. We are containing meaning. We are containing knowledge. Knowledge is like, we saw a butterfly and we captured it in a plastic bag, but instead of the plastic bag, it's the linguistic simulation, it's language. You know? There has been times where I have commanded geometry in my inner realms. What I mean is I have thrown thoughts. So I'll give you an example. Imagine I'm walking in the, like I walk, I'll give you an example. Recently, right? I was walking outside and I see this, you know, very beautiful person, and for a second my mind brings too extreme of a thought into my mind, and literally, you know how a fly is around your head, you push it aside? I push aside the thought. I literally throw the thought, you know. That means it's like when somebody hears, imagine you've walked a very elegant day and somebody shares something that's disgusting, right? So what do? You kind of want to, like, throw it away or push the idea away, right? And I have had times where literally, like, imagine there's, like, you know how there's a smell, people kind of, like, you know, they wave their hand in front of their nose. I've had times where I've waved my hand in front of, like, my forehead, you know. As if kind of being like, hey, thought, get out of here. You know, unnecessary thought that arose, get out of here. Because not all thoughts are meant to be engaged, and not all thoughts are necessary to be engaged. I think the listeners don't know how many thoughts, when I speak, anytime I speak, how many other thoughts I'm seeing that I'm not sharing, right? And the way I'm seeing all of it is because there's an interdependence of any shape. That means it's like there's an ocean of geometry, and the shape of an idea is like a drop in that ocean. So by seeing the single drop in the ocean, you're actually seeing the ocean. And you know, who would have thought we would be so blessed as a species to have access to cosmic awareness? Take that in. Just take that in, that right now, all the animals, all the other species on the planet, they're asleep. They don't care about black holes beyond the atmosphere. It is man. It is man that has awakened to a greater game of evolution. And that's what evolution really is. You know, I mean, sure, survival of the fittest, but it's also unlocking new games and modalities of experience. Geometry is very important, and the destiny of the species is dependent on what kind of designers are on this planet and what they design. I am telling you, the future is in the hand of designers. And without designers, I will tell you, we would miss out on how fast the species can update. Because nobody knows what the future is. I mean, take that in. Even though I simulate through my inner realms the probabilities of how the world can move into the future, the worlds I've seen can move into the future. But the whole thing about the unknown is that it's unknown. I have playfully in my science fiction, so I'm working on this giant science fiction novel called The Messenger of Giants, and I will tell you that some parts of this novel, the characters are based on my own inner experiences, but there's a character I have created in this science fiction work of mine by the name of Lord Mistos, the Geometrical Messenger, or the Archangel of Geometry, as he's referred to in the book. And he's this character when I realized, like, of course, the concept of an archangel is like the brightest ray, the biggest ray of the sun. You know what I mean? The archangels are like, the superior levels of divine administration, through, let's say, theological context. Pretty much the scene is like there's this main character called Farda. Anyways, what happens is there's a scene where this main character, he's a divine character, and he doesn't, like, he goes till the end of the show. But it's kind of like, how would I tell you? It's pretty much time stops and everything becomes just pure geometry, and this kid called Farda finds himself in a room having a conversation with the Archangel of Geometry, Lord Mistos. This is just in something science fiction story I've written. And that was a scene where I've personally had, I would say poetically, very poetic experiences in my inner realms. Not that geometry has been an archangel, not to that level, but I have experienced moments where when there is no thought of self, there is only the divine. And when you see the divine, it's overwhelming. And it's so overwhelming that when you instantly, I would say, come back to the regular state of mind, you know, of the it's like when let's say if you really deeply go into your inner realms and then you come out of the inner realms, when you step out of the inner realms, there has to be faith in one's individualism. When you want to step into the inner realms, there has to be faith in one's collectivism, pretty much, right? So when you return from a collective state of being, it's equivalent to being teleported out of nowhere back into a moment where it's empty, but when your memories activated, it finds meaning. Just a pointer to the audience in the chat section. Please write what you feel is necessary and try to have all your ideas. Try to, with the least amount of words, say the most in the chat section. Lorna says, Mr. Within, I used to have really red dreams, or really red dreams as a kid. Rad dreams as a kid where I flew at will and even had a tell for myself to know I was in a dream. Okay. So you established a relationship, a conscious relationship in your dream state. Okay, that's nice. Now I barely have them. How do I get that back? First of all, if you are under the impression you've lost it, then you will never get it back because you're believing that you've lost it. So the state of mind has to begin from a state that is already victorious. You know, some people play like billiard or sports where they're trying to win and you're like, oh, how adorable. And then there are some people who have already won. They're seeing a reality and outcome of the finale, you know, of the final event, right? of let's say that sport event, right? You know, that means the soccer player that has the ball and is running towards the net, that soccer player has a vision, you know, has a goal in mind, has an objective, sees a possibility, sees a way to shoot that ball, and if the universe allows, go through the smile of the gods, the ball hits the edge of the crossbar and goes in, you know. I would say it's your attitude. If you've lost something, you've lost something. If you found something, you found something. The mind is preferenceless at its core. That means if you opened up the engine of the car, it has nothing to do with the beauty of the outer of the car, right? The engine does not have the same beauty as the outside of the car. You know, it's like reading, you know, a scientific fact that human beings are made of 70% water, and, you know, thinking of your love life and you're like, how often I've dated water, you know. Poetically, when human beings unite, it's like a walking ocean. Without a trust in anything, in any tool, one cannot use it. If Tony Stark doesn't trust the Iron Man suit, he cannot use it. Do you see? If you as a human being do not trust the unknown and known dimensions of your intelligence that are accessible to you, you cannot use them, right? So a person cannot use their mind if they're locked into a photograph of self-identity. Upon the recognition that experience is a dynamism, one is freed from the past defining them, really. It's as if they ask, who is that person? And the correct answer is, the world is changing too often to be able to define. I'm trying to think what other experiences. Like when I drive in the highway, I also see geometry overlaid. Like I can pretty much fathom like how many. It's kind of like you in space. Think of it this way: when you ask someone what is 2 + 2, they say 4. So the person had the imagination to project the number, the arithmetic, right? Now we have an imagination to fill empty space with not just language, which is ultimately geometry. The letters are just geometrical shapes. But in the sense that you can fill the space with geometry, and if you've noticed how your mind moves, moving geometry. And I will be very interested if somebody has an experience in their inner realms with geometry, they can feel free to write me a letter. I would totally be down to read those and try to see how other human beings are wielding geometry, And something I personally do, guys, anytime the emotions overwhelm me, when I concentrate on the shape of the moment, automatically the person just goes towards the logic of the moment. Because when we care about what's going on, it's kind of like saying we want to know how the shape of the moment is turning out. And I would say this is part of the core of the philosophy of the street smart individuals on this planet. They are noticing the shape of the moment changing and how it's changing and from where the significance of the moment is arising. So guys, I'm go into actually a quote tunnel of geometry and then share with the audience some techniques I use for my art, and then I'm gonna dissolve into geometry and end the talk. Okay, so time to dive into the quote tunnel. I'm coughing because of the dust in the quote tunnel, guys. Yeah. All right, where is this page? Johann Kepler. Geometry is the archetype of the beauty of the world. Incredible. Pythagoras says there is geometry in the humming of the strings. There's music in the spacing of the spheres. Plato says geometry will draw the soul toward truth and create the spirit of philosophy. Johann Kepler says, where there is matter, there is geometry. Euripides says, mighty is geometry, joined with art, resistless. Plato says it is through geometry that one purifies the eye of the soul. And when Plato says geometry, guys, think of the geometry of your world, not just geometric shapes you were taught in math class. The design of reality is magnificent. And Anthony Garrett Lisi, I think the universe is pure geometry, basically a beautiful shape twisting around and dancing over space-time. Yup, exactly. Ibn Khaldun says geometry enlightens the intellect and sets one's mind right. All of its proofs are very clear and orderly. It is hardly possible for errors to enter into geometrical reasoning because it is well arranged and orderly. Thus, the mind that constantly applies itself to geometry is not likely to fall into error. In this convenient way, the person who knows geometry acquires intelligence. Yeah, guys, geometry, it's like is literally like, after, if we really look close at the linguistic simulation, it's geometry. The illusion of language is a geometrical attachment. It's our obsession with the character in the story that at the end is dust. It's just stardust moving around. There has to be greater retaliation towards the mysteries of consciousness. Pythagoras says geometry is knowledge of the eternally existent. Oh my God, guys, these quotes I'm reading are like, I wish I had read them earlier, at the beginning of the episode. Voltaire says there is only one morality, as there is only one geometry. Stephen Hawking says equations are just the boring part of mathematics. I attempt to see things in terms of geometry. Albert Dürer says geometry is the foundation of all painting. George Polya says geometry is the science of correct reasoning on incorrect figures. Pretty much he's saying our consciousness is just selecting out of this all-you-can-eat buffet of all-you-can-perceive buffet of geometrical shapes in this realm. Even people are geometrical shapes. Even love stories where lovers have fallen in love with each other, they haven't fallen in love with the geometry of their bodies only. They have fallen in love with the geometry of how they animate as a person into the moment, right? So one's nature is a powerful thing, and if people stay true to their nature, they may suddenly find themselves not having abilities, but being in a world of ability, where every moment, if the attention is piloted correctly, the divine arises. It shows itself before you can see it, and that's the majesty of the universe. Henry Cartier-Bresson says, in order to give meaning to the world, one has to feel oneself involved in what he frames. This attitude requires concentration, a discipline of mind, sensitivity, and the sense of geometry. Sophie Germain: algebra is nothing more than geometry in words. Geometry is nothing more than algebra in pictures. I mean, yes, true, but algebra is way more limited. That's why I'm from the school of thought that I treat geometry as its own branch. It's like geometry has stayed too long in mathematics, home, right? Geometry is its own kingdom. I am telling you, there will be people in the future who their pure philosophy is just that it's just geometric movement. I am telling you, in other talks I've told you the great happening, right? I remember when my parents asked about my philosophy, specifically my mother asked me about my philosophy on this life, and I just told her very simply, it's just a great happening, a grand happening, something so vast and universal is taking place, and we just open our eyes as a part of it. Our free will is just a specific range and domain of this giant vast movement. And when you realize that consciousness is the event, to a point, guys, where I gave an episode, I coined the term, we have the atom being the smallest particle in physics, and I perceive that we have the eventum, being the smallest unit of psychology. That really there is no such thing as a person. There's just memories of events where there was a separation from the world and how that geometrically occurred. I'm pretty much saying it's like when a person remembers something or sees something, either way, when they look at content, it's again think of the three dimensions of color, depth, and shape, right? So when you see these three dimensions, imagine you go into a dimension, there is no color, there's just shape and space. Imagine you go to a dimension where there's only color and space, there is no shape. There are the void walkers here in this world, vast giant clouds of intelligence on our earth, where they are in some sense invisible presence, but they are not personalized, they're not humanized. They are pretty much how the sky is alive, regardless of embodiment. You know, it's like human beings for a second being like, wait a minute, what if the atmosphere is this next level collective extraterrestrial cloud that has encapsulated the earth to animate it? Do you know the wonders of the world go beyond the linearized acceptance of the story of the world? Plato, sorry guys, I got interrupted for a moment. Plato says, I'll read it again. Plato says geometry draws the soul towards truth. Plato says experience proves that anyone who has studied geometry, and anybody who experience proves that anyone who has studied geometry is infinitely quicker to grasp difficult subjects than one who has not. Isaac Newton says the description of right lines and circles upon which geometry is founded belongs to mechanics. Geometry does not teach us to draw these lines, but requires them to be drawn. And you can say geometry is also another way we translate the inner realms into the outer realms, whether it's an invention, it's an artwork, or whatever, right? Because meaning is like the container of the moment. So when somebody says, what does your artwork mean? It's like, it is how the person's mind engages the universe of that design. Louis de Bernier says the human heart likes a little disorder in its geometry. Plato says the knowledge of which geometry aims is the knowledge of the eternal. Benoit Mandelbrot says, why is geometry often described as cold and dry? One reason lies in its inability to describe the shape of a cloud, a mountain, a coastline, or a tree. Aristotle says the mathematical sciences particularly exhibit order, symmetry, and limitations, and these are the greatest forms of the beautiful. Johann Kepler says geometry existed before the creation. It is co-eternal with the mind of God. Geometry provided God with a model for the creation. That means the shape of the universe is as divine as the creator's, effort. It's not human beings that are divine. It is that divinity is the mystery of intelligence, as the whole world happening in one moment. But it's an incredible quote. Geometry provided God with a model for the creation. You can say if we didn't have geometry, there would be no concept of God. It's a sort of geometrical relationship with the universe. Claude Debussy says music is the arithmetic of sounds as optics is the geometry of light. Gustav Flaubert says everything one invents is true. You may be perfectly sure that poetry is as precise as geometry. So that's the end of the quote tunnel, guys. I'm gonna share with you some of my artwork, and then this talk can land. By the way, anybody who has questions about geometry moving in the inner realms, feel free to ask it right now. Okay. I will share with you a work of art that I call Rivers of Arcana. This was the 4th artwork I ever drew in this life. The 4th conscious artwork. I drew this in 2015, and the way my initial is the way it's meant to be positioned, actually. Let me see if I could find, I drew this with just whatever pen I found in the moment. Or here, I'll show you another one, actually. Yeah, this one's at least in the proper position. So this one is called Forbidden Shards. Every artwork I draw, I have this philosophy that the last brush stroke of the artwork is the name given to the artwork. Because it's a creation, what do human beings do with creation? They name it. You know, children are born and we're like, you know, identity is born as well. The opportunity for it, at least. So here is the artwork, Forbidden Shards. That's the name of it. So when I drew this, guys, in 2015, if I was to explain to you as a sort of contribution to this episode of what was going on in my inner realms, you'll be fascinated that there wasn't geometry in my inner realms. In my inner realms, there was just this, my attention felt concentrated, and in some sense there was just an emotion. So it was, imagine this whole picture came out of an emotion. It didn't come out of just like as if the blueprint of the architecture was there. You know, it was as if it was like the trust in the emptiness of the page allowed the hand to move in whatever way, you know. And hopefully, guys, one day this beautiful artwork will be on sale, you know, someday, you know. But for me, guys, it's like the whole point is art deserves way more than we, in some sense. For me, the evolution of the intelligence of the species is way more important than any ego I can hold on to about the realm. So I'm gonna go from the beginning, and if you look at the wallpaper, you'll see the middle of it. You see what I've done? I've used space. This artwork is, I would say, an example of trust in space. I just want to show you the end of the artwork where there's a sort of distance. You see the line going down towards the end on the left side. This maybe took me, I think, an hour, 30 minutes to draw. And of course I used probably like a card, a ruler, or the edge of a tissue box, you know. You know, some professional art, street art going on, guys, you know, or like living room art, you know. You find whatever is in your living room to draw something. And that's it, guys. This is, I hope this artwork shows people that it's very multidimensional here, and it's a privilege of consciousness to access dimensions and to be able to create bridges of meaning between. Hopefully the viewers can see the picture in the wallpaper. I can't see it from my side for some reason. Let me see another one where it's just dedicated to Mr.Within's gift. Okay, there's one I'll show you. I have to show you guys this. This is one of my best art, like the best things I've ever drew. And it's called Interstellar Canals. I'll show it to the viewers. I remember when I drew this, it was like, afterwards when I looked at what I had drew, I was like, oh my god, I'm like a chef who's like cooked like a meal that, like, you know, it was freaking me out a little. But it was just perspective. So what I'm doing is, it's like I'm having a fearless approach that both chaos and order can be used, and the absence of one dimension is the fulfillment of the other, and the fulfillment of, and the absence of another dimension is, do you see, it's like two sides of a coin. And so really our mind is like this, poetically. It is multi-directed. Okay, here. This is the last artwork I want to show the viewers. I'll show you actually two, but for some reason I can't find the picture. Yeah, strange. Just a second, guys. I need more time to find this. You know, it's kind of like we don't think about our heart, right? We don't think about our heart beating, it just beats. And there are states where we just go into this emotional vibe, and the next, like, creativity just pours out as a surplus of perception or concentration. There we go, I found it, guys, here, finally. So this is the picture. This was an artwork I drew. It was one of the early ones. And it's called Find Me. And it was dedicated to the Mr.Within channel. I drew this in 2015. Here it is. There we go. This is it. This one, it was a very profound one, this one. So what it is I am actually, the method of drawing I'm using is I am sculpting emptiness, the empty piece of paper. I am sculpting it. You know, and when you sculpt something, Michelangelo has this quote. He says, "I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free." I would say I see a shape. There is like the knowing of what to draw when I draw at first, but then it becomes automated, kind of like you're driving and the vehicle goes on cruise control. And then in that cruise control, my hand has a ridiculous mechanical certainty. Like, I don't know, like if people see how I draw things at like a regular speed, it's really strange. It's literally like the pen is moving, right? And the way it is, the reason it's happening like that is because I am not thinking about my hand holding the pen. It's like a single emotion can trigger the movement, right? So think of emotions being a very complex cloud of various different kinds of thoughts and moments, right? So when a person is in an emotion, they can instantly use various views to, in some sense, solidify one. And I'll show the viewers one last one, which was, I think, one of the last pictures I drew. It's a very, usually this one is, this was like, the aim was not geometrical lines, the aim was something else. So this is another one I'm very, oh my god. And guys, actually before I show you this one, I'll do something with this. Here, I'll do this. Yeah. Okay, this way people can see the geometrical universe from the top to the bottom. Okay, so now the other one. The other one is this. I'll actually start with showing you this way of it. So guys, whoever's listening right now, you should be looking at the picture of the video. This one is called Veins of Avalon. And the way, guys, I try to draw my initial, like it's kind of me standing in that geometrical universe. There we go. There we go. Now it's like exact size. Almost exact size. There we go. Anyways, guys, geometry is a very incredible component to human intelligence. Your mind has content. That content is geometric. Life is very beautiful when you look at its design. The geometrical dimension has a strange purity to it. A geometrical shape cannot be perverted, cannot be corrupted. It just is what it is. You see, there's a purity. There's a strange existential innocence to just geometry, even to color, to depth and space, you know. It's as if existence is very innocently just being existence, and man is like the additional dimensions of activity upon the surface of the earth. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. one important thing I want to say is when it comes to the idea of transcendental allegiances, when the spirit of geometry finds you, it's a moment where you have noticed the design of the movement of your realm. That is a very mighty moment when one notices that geometry is being an awareness instantaneously as a world. From an awareness to the presence within, we start as freedom observing the illusion. Behind our eyes, there is a lot of geometrical phenomena, numenology, inner occurrences of geometrical movements, but because we identify through the emotions with the human animal, we cannot be limited to the geometry, so we don't notice it. So what that means is it's like when we didn't have an identity, the unconscious self, the body, the animal body just wanted more information to survive, right? It had to know more to, in some sense, that was the whole survival of the fittest approach. But when we became formed as an individual, then we actually pushed information in the background and allowed the human ideal through ignorance to walk in its own realm, you know. And so I would say, may this episode be a calling to all those human beings on this earth that in their life, in the karma of their lifetime, there is something that they have to do with the geometry of the realm. You know, and I will say the geometry of the realm, it's like we have done nothing yet. It's all just waiting there, right? There's so much we can do that can transcend our belief. Anyways, whoever you are, thank you for listening. And global initiatives will be shared, you know, in future project supporter meetings for members. Language is geometry in motion. And there's an old saying where somebody went to the sage and had a question like, what do I do, you know, with my karma, you know? And the sage, not with my karma, but what do I do? One of those kind of questions, you know. And the sage says you have two options in this life. You either trust the moment or you don't. If you don't trust the moment, you lock yourself, not lock, but you bunker down into an archetype. But if you trust the moment and trust the unknown, the wilderness of the world will not let you be ignorant. You see the nature of the realm before its ideological encapsulation. You know, direct experience is really the only way. Truth, you know, seldom is said that it in some sense has no shape, I would say. I would say truth is experience, is the origin of experience. When you reach that, it is like you have gone deeper than the time allows of your realm. So the psychology has to enter emptiness, and from emptiness new geometrical shapes or new archetypes are found. And then one, in accordance to their choice and how they pilot their attention in their inner realms, can have a relationship with it, with the content of it. All I'm saying is it's the same for the inner realms. If you don't trust the moment, nothing happens. If you trust the moment, you can watch nature as it is occurring the same time you are. You know, not being ignorant that there is, of course, the solipsistic urge, where when the person achieves something, they want to say, I did it, but really nobody achieves anything alone. It's when the stars align poetically, or when the planets align, when the moment is in some sense, the interdependence of the moment authorizes for the evolution of that, because everybody right now on this planet can say anything, but I know the mindset is unauthorized. Desires want the authorization of freedom. That's it. Human psychology and society is just lost in that dynamic, in that sort of psychological painting. I can totally see that in the future, children are playing with the most advanced geometrical toys. That means playgrounds are made with such symmetrical and geometrical precision and might, I would say accuracy, that it's as if a child going to the playground is entering a universe that in some sense has a portal to mathematics, right? Because the philosophy behind mathematics, ultimately behind all systems of shaping the unknown, it's kind of like the general looks at the battlefield, realizes there's going to be a war, for a moment closes his eyes, breathes in that darkness and silence, and then opens his eyes and enters the battlefield, not afraid of where he began from. Life is an incredible journey, and our attention is divinity in the room. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings and awesome.